Right, now there are loads of examples of horror movie moments that have stuck with me and still terrify me to this day, which I've spoke about loads across our channels, like the party scene in Signs being one of the earliest moments that I felt true existential dread, and my mom ringing me up on the phone after watching The Ring to go 7 days and making me think I was getting haunted by Samara. Thanks, Mom. Great, wonderful. But what I'm going to talk about in this video is kind of like a specific type of scene that comes up in loads of found footage movies, and every time I see it, it just makes me deeply, deeply uncomfortable, which is like tunnel scenes. Claustrophobic tunnel scenes where someone's crawling through a small little tiny space, trying to get out, trying to get to safety, and everyone's very stressed and something bad happens. And it happens so much, like it plays on that proper primal, visceral fear of being in a tight claustrophobic space. I hate it so much. The most potent example of it that I can think of that truly upset me watching it in the cinema was in Blair Witch 2016, where like our lovely leading lady has gone under a house and she's trying to crawl away from the titular Blair Witch who's coming after her going, "Ugh, I'm a scary witch," underneath the house in a tiny crawl space, and she gets stuck halfway, like she's there, her arms are all pinned to her, she's in a dirty little puddle stuck under a house with a nasty scary monster coming after her, and she's stuck. She is stuck there, cannot move, having a panic attack, and it's just so visceral and real and primal, and like I'm getting het up just thinking about it. It is awful. It's so well realised. It's the most underrated sequel ever, by the way. Blair Witch 2016, a great movie. Don't listen to anyone else telling you it's bad. It is a great movie and a great found footage movie, and this moment is the worst. But it's not just in this film. You've got it in like The Descent, where they're crawling through and then the cave collapses. You've got it in stuff like The Pyramid. Like, you've got it in stuff like As Above, So Below, where they're in the catacombs. You've got it in the end of The Borderlands, where this horrible, nasty belly is like dissolving two men that can't escape and getting pressed up against digestive juices that have come out of nowhere because the ground is suddenly a giant, like, throat, belly, inside nastiness. Tunnels. Tunnels are the worst scenes in horror movies. Full stop. There's a nice broad answer for you. They will always terrify me. Future films, I'm scared of them already. Past films, I hate watching them and I think about them. When I'm in the dark, I'm lying in bed going, oh no, please don't all the walls close in on me, because it's the worst. It taps in to the visceral primal fear. I'm repeating myself because I'm like, it's horrible. Tunnel scenes. The end.
The horror movie moment that will always terrify me is the opening scene from 28 Weeks Later. A bit of a backstory here. I don't really do horror movies, but I'm also not really asked about a lot of the characters that are involved in it, or the scary things like spiders and snakes. Not bothered. Killer clowns, bring them on. Evil dolls, don't make me laugh. But one thing I do not do is zombies. Just no. I don't know why I sat down to watch 28 Weeks Later with my mates, because I'd already seen 28 Days Later and, you know, scared the bejesus out of myself with it. The bit with the blood going in your man's eye and he... No, just no. But anyway, 28 Weeks Later's opening scene on a seemingly monthly basis wakes me up in a cold sweat. That little kid shows up to that farmhouse, and guess what? He's brought his zombie mates with him. They try and get away. The zombies tear apart the house. They tear apart half the occupants, including that poor old couple. And then there's that scene with Robert Carlyle and his wife where they're in the bedroom and the wife says, we've got to save the kid. Not me, I wouldn't. Not my kid, not my problem. And then the zombie comes in. Robert Carlyle's on one side of the room, his wife's on the other. She says, help us. And just as I would in that situation, probably with my own wife, I go, yeah, sorry, love, you're on your own. As I said, I don't do zombies. He slams the door in her face. Well, not in her face, in the zombie's face. Rude. Legs it, and there's that moment, that shot where he's running towards the boat on the river, and there's that hill of zombies, blood everywhere, those red eyes just sprinting towards him. Oh, I can't even, just talking about it now is... horrible, terrifying scene. Good soundtrack though, so one saving grace, I suppose.
Well, I'm going to cheat, obviously, because I always like to ramble on these things, but I'm going to do a quick double whammy. One comes from American Werewolf in London, and it's actually more or less the whole opening, but specifically when they're both wandering around the moors, you hear the werewolf howls. I saw that when I was far too young to watch it. And just the idea of kind of being trapped in the wilderness with a werewolf on the prowl, like that got me as a kid. It still gets me now, like that entire opening, even though it is comedic, it hits something primal within me. But what actually tops that in terms of things that I get uncomfortable watching now is, I'm pretty sure he's called Todd. Todd's death scene in the original Final Destination in the bathroom, where he chokes on a bit of like a clothes horse, like a little wire. And that entire sequence, again, watched it far too young, haunts me to this day, and I'm scared of bathrooms and water because of it. Because even though Final Destination is a supernatural infused horror, and it's literally death coming for them, that scene is so visceral and kind of so not realistic, but certainly gritty in the way that the death is kind of portrayed. The strangulation, it looks real. The way the camera work kind of catches him scrambling in the bathtub, it looks real. The way his eyes go bloodshot just as he's about to die, like that is an image that has haunted me forever. And even now, as a grown-up, watching the scene again, I can appreciate it, that it's much campier than I thought it was when I was younger. The music is classically old school, kind of early 2000s, late 90s horror. It's overdone, but that moment where the eyes go red, it still gets me. It still scares me. And that's why Final Destination, for all of its flaws, will continue to be a genuinely scary movie, even if it is silly and daft and a lot of fun, because that scene, ooh no, it made me scared of water and nose clippers, because there's a bit where it almost goes up his nose. Grim.
So a horror movie moment that will always terrify me has to be the scene in The Entity, and I'm going to try and phrase this in the nicest way possible, but when she is sexually attacked by a spirit, by a ghost or a demon or something. I don't know if they ever actually clarify what it is. And it's just terrifying because not only is this based on a true story, so this supposedly happened to this poor woman, and obviously getting anything like this sort of happen to you by a living or dead person is horrible, but just physically watching it happen and knowing that she can't see what it is that's attacking her and she can't fight it off, but the way that they physically manipulate her body is just so disturbing. And I remember watching this film, and it's quite an old film, and it's one of the only films that my dad said that he absolutely hated. He's not a big horror fan, not that he's scared of them, but he just doesn't enjoy watching them. And he watched it with my mum, who is a huge horror fan, and he said it's like one of the only horror films that he has ever watched that just truly disturbed him, and he just absolutely hated it. He just thought it was just so terrifying to watch this poor woman be attacked by something that she can't see. It's horrible. And it's just the way that they make her, her body sort of like sinks down. You can see this thing sort of touching her and her skin sinking down, and it's happening to, her chest area and her thighs, and it's just horrible. I don't know how they did it. I still can't rack my brain around how they managed to do those sort of effects for such an old movie, but it's so brilliantly done that it is just disturbing. It's just so disturbing, and it completely convinces you that this woman is really being attacked by an invisible force, and it's horrible. It's horrible to watch, and it really did sort of leave me sort of feeling just really uncomfortable, and it just really terrified me to the point where whenever I get like a weird twitch in my body, I'm just panicking that it's going to be some sort of horrible entity that's going to start attacking me, and it's not good. I hate it. It's horrible to watch, but damn, that movie's good.
Right, okay, so if we're going to talk about horror movie moments that will always terrify me, they literally will just never stop terrifying me until the end of time. No matter how much I watch it, I am a little baby about a lot of things, and particularly horror that isn't supernatural, so I can talk endlessly about how the stalking sequences in the original Halloween scare the bejesus out of me, or that bit where Leatherface comes out the bit in Texas Chainsaw Massacre and is just staring at them and then hammers the dude in the head. That's really scary as well. But if I'm going to talk about anything, it's going to be a kind of a really bad film that came out in 1979 called When a Stranger Calls. Now, the reason why I say the film is bad is because you only need to watch the first 20 minutes of it. Everything after is completely irredeemably just bad. It's not worth watching, and that's because the film itself is based on a 1977 short film called The Sitter, and it's all about that old urban legend about the babysitter and the man upstairs, which kind of gives away the entire premise now. Anyway, I'm going to assume that if you're an adult and you've lived a life, you'll know what the urban legend is about. But anyway, when a stranger calls, the first 20 minutes always get under my skin because it preys upon the idea that anyone could be in your living space, which is terrifying. In the attic, in a different room, in somewhere else. And basically the whole premise is, of course, you all know that this babysitter in the film called Jill is hired to babysit two children who, while the parents go off to have a lovely romantic meal at a restaurant, and she starts getting really weird calls from like just awful calls about this man, and he keeps on calling and he keeps on saying, have you checked the children? And these calls happen every like 15 or so minutes, and it just gets to the point where the tension is just escalating and ramping up, and as you would do in that situation, she calls the police and is like, hey, there's a guy just like calling me, and it's really creepy. He keeps on asking me why I haven't checked the children, and I haven't checked the children because they're asleep, so whatever. And then the police have a little drive-by around the neighborhood and they can't find anyone, and she must be like, oh, must be okay. Then the call starts again, and then after that she calls the police again and is like, look, this is really freaky. He's now threatening to kill me. Please do something about it. So the police are like, aha, don't you worry, we will put a tracer on this call, so when he calls you next time, just keep him on the line for a little bit. And she does. And the conversation is honestly terrifying. I hate it. And then she gets the call back, and the police are like, we've traced the call. It's coming from inside the house. Wow, like that. And I'm just literally, my heart sinks every time. It's just like, that's horrifying, the idea that you spent the entire time and this guy's been toying with you literally up above. Oh my god, I hate it. Absolutely hate it. And the pièce de résistance of it all is the fact that when that happens, she runs to the door, and you see the door on the upstairs open slightly, and she opens the door, and it's the police officer. And it flashes forward a little bit, and you see that they're basically going through the crime scene, and that both the kids have been dead since he first started calling. It's just a really cruel opening, and something that really, really kind of just gets under my skin. I hate the idea that there are bits of a living space that I live in, and I don't know if there could be people in there. That might be a really irrational fear to have, but I feel as though it preys on a primal fear that, it's the whole idea of like a horrible force penetrating your safe space. And when a stranger calls, at least the first 20 minutes of it does that better than quite a lot of horror movies, and will always stay in my mind as a result. So yeah, when a stranger calls, watch the first 20 minutes. Everything afterwards is just pish. But the first 20 minutes, genuinely terrifying. And yeah,